Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are here with our session of PIER that's actually featuring one of our longest standing members. I'm super excited to tell you all about her and to get everyone involved in what's going on. But first, what we're going to cover a little bit here is, if this is your first time joining us with PIER, what that means. So PIER is Positivity and Innovation for Edmonton's Reopening. And where it stemmed from was the need for positivity. We have gone through a lot as a community over the years, but during this time of COVID, we needed something positive to grab onto. There were a lot of very sad things going on right away, and as a community, we wanted to be able to embrace some of the positivity. One of the first things that we're going to get started with is our land acknowledgement. So before we move forward, I'll start there. I would also I'd like to welcome anybody, if they have any questions about our land acknowledgement, to reach out to Nehewin or any of the people that we've worked with there. But Homestead and myself honors and thanks to many First Nations on whose historical and traditional lands Edmonton was founded, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge and embrace the fact that we are on the traditional lands of Treaty 6 territory and the traditional Métis homelands of Region 4. We acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. We do this to create awareness that we are all treaty people, and to show recognition and respect for Indigenous people in the traditional territories on which we live, work, and play. We take our responsibilities with Indigenous people seriously, and together we call upon all of our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and for future generations. Homestead holds the values of inclusiveness and diversity deep within the founding of the space, and this series was created with those same intentions. As we started and explained before, there was a lack of positivity in our community, and first and foremost, this is something that we need to bring forward. So today we will be focusing on a very interesting nonprofit that is very near and dear to the hearts of many in the Homestead space. Our co-founder of Homestead, Tegan Martin Drysdale, was actually involved in the founding of IDEA as well. So what we're going to be talking about today is infill development, which is very cool and very interesting. There's some things that maybe some people don't quite know about infill, and I think we're going to shed some of that mystery today. So I'm very, very excited to introduce Mariah Samji. No doubt a familiar face to anybody who's been in Homestead, for sure. She's the Executive Director of Infill Development Association in Edmonton, or IDEA. And Mariah is actually a double graduate of the University of Alberta, definitely entrenched in the Edmonton community beyond the work that she has done with the City of Edmonton, which has been pretty extensive, involving the ETS Transit Committee, couple other things here and there, community league, volunteering all the hours. She actually also helps out with her mom's store as a buyer, who's an independent business owner in Edmonton. So welcome, Mariah. I'm so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for the overly lovely introduction. That is so heartwarming and special. So thank you. Yeah, I have been one of the longest standing members of Homestead, I think. I've been in this space for about 3.5 years. When I started, I was in a different dedicated desk, and then I was very lucky that the guy sitting next to me, who is a filmmaker, was moving into an office space, and he had the window space, and he kind of tapped me on my shoulder and was like, "You should take the window space. It is fantastic." And I am sorry to everyone else who has been in the space for the past 3 years, because I have definitely hogged the really, really nice dedicated desk. But through that, I have made so many wonderful connections through Homestead. Whether it's people helping me with grants and helping our organization grow, to other architects and planners in the space, where we get to nerd out about things like parking and setbacks and the quality of different developments, or it's people who are in marketing and communications and web design who helped me when my computers crashed or my website went down, or taught me about Canva and Pixel, so that I have I'm not taking photos off the internet that are not given, which is really lovely because I never really liked that, but I needed new resources, and I definitely got that from other Homestead members. So the best thing about Homestead is the people and the amount of sharing that people do. And because we're all small to growing either nonprofits or small businesses or enterprises, we're willing to help each other out and willing to push. And it's a very Edmonton thing. And I love that about Edmonton. So thank you so much for having me here today and for making Homestead awesome and comfortable and cozy and warm.
No problem. I mean, thanks to you for that, honestly. The backspace has been different with the kind of work from home, coming in occasionally thing, for sure.
Yes, well, and you guys let me put up all my posters, so it's nice to have a space that feels like home when I go in. So why don't we get into Infill and what Infill is? I'm just gonna share my screen. All right, let me know if you're seeing a presentation version. Perfect. All right, so IDEA, or Infill Development and Edmonton Association. The founders of IDEA came up with a great acronym. It's super easy to remember, and it's definitely helped with the growth of our organization. So before I get into who we are and what we do, I just want to talk to you a little bit about Infill Development. Infill Development is new-ish to Edmonton. It's been happening since the 70s and 80s, but really a lot of our homes in Edmonton were built right after World War II, where a whole bunch of men came home and they needed places, whether they were starting a family or just by themselves. So what happened was we quickly built a lot of tract housing. So what you'll see in the first version of Edmonton suburbs are small little bungalow houses on big lots, where the built quality, some are good and some are okay, but they weren't built to last forever. But they were built to be homes and to be cozy and to have people grow up in them, which they have definitely served that purpose and people love them. But as our city grows, those buildings, because they weren't built to last forever, are now in the phase for redevelopment. So the land is worth significantly more than the actual building, and that small bungalow style no longer meets the needs of the new market. So people have different needs. They like taller ceilings, more bathrooms, sometimes fewer bedrooms or different types of bedrooms, walk-in closets. It's what we as consumers are expecting in our homes going forward. So, but when you hear infill development, a lot of people think skinny houses, and that's what it's synonymous with in Edmonton. But as some of you may or may not know, that is not the only form of infill development. So what is infill? Infill is a lot of the spaces in and around the city that you love and enjoy. So whether it's a modern house or more of a traditional looking home, whether it's made by Marcus and you're getting really yummy ice cream and their cones are so legit, or you're going to a concert at Rogers Place one day, again, not now because we need to be safe, but all of these places are infill. And what infill means is we're using the land that already has some infrastructure built into it, whether that infrastructure is up to the capacity that is needed, or whether it needs to be taken out and replaced, or whether there was a gas station on it and it needs to be remediated, or whether it's a parking lot and it's been utilized or underutilized, or like if it's just like Blatchford, it was a really great municipal airport for a long time. And now it's turning into a different use for our city because our needs are growing as a city. So we have tons of different types of infill development in Edmonton. And that's part of IDEA's mission, is to help grow that understanding that it's both residential, commercial, industrial, it's 7 plexes and small commercial bays, and it's places that we live, grow, work, sleep, play in. It's all of the fun things. So you may ask yourself, they must make a ton of money. They're taking a $350,000 house or a $450,000 house, and they're putting an $800,000 house on it. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about why that is and what some of the big barriers for infill. So some of the big barriers are lot consolidation, the high cost of land, banks and lenders' risk tolerance, the rules and regulations that we work with, and our current infrastructure in Edmonton. So what does all of that mean? Well, lot consolidation is when you take one or two, or you take more than one lot and you try and build across those lots. So you're amalgamating them, whether to put a small commercial development there or a row house or apartment building. When you buy the first lot, you are probably going to be able to get a good deal on it. When you buy the second lot, your neighbor's like, ooh, well, you're kind of stuck with me. So the price is inflated a bit. And then when you try and go for the third lot, everyone knows that you want the third lot, and negotiation is really difficult. And so because that land has appreciated so much, because there's wonderful amenities in that neighborhood and the trees are big and beautiful, and that's one of the best things about mature neighborhoods, all of a sudden it becomes really, really expensive. Not only that, the banks and lenders that you work with, if you're a big builder or developer, banks have more trust in you. If you're a small to medium guy, it can be really, really difficult to gain financing for these projects. And it doesn't mean you're not good at your job. It doesn't mean that you don't have really innovative and exciting ideas. It just means you're a growing business, like all of us at Homestead. So the risk tolerance is really low for these types of people. And so your lending rates are much higher. And so there's very limited room for anything to go wrong. And that's where kind of the rules and regulations come into play as well. So our rules and regulations for building inside of Edmonton are more than 20 years old. And it's something that the city of Edmonton, it's something that the city of Edmonton and groups like IDEA and other associations and communities are working to rectify. So we're taking our 800-page rule book that has just been added here and there and tweaked here and there over the past 20 years and throwing it out the window and building a new rule book. But because our rule book is so old and so vast, things go wrong all the time. And so when you think your project will take 45 days to get a permit, it actually takes 83 days. And so each extra day you're accruing land interest on it, which is like $80 a day, and that adds up significantly. And so it goes into the end cost of the project, which who wants to pay for carrying costs? That sucks and it's not fun. And then if you want to build something that doesn't exactly conform to the rules, then you have to go for what is called a variance. And then you have to ask all your neighbors, is it okay if you build 5 centimeters to the left so that you avoid the tree on the right, or you put a setback in, or you put a balcony in? There's lots of reasons that people ask for variances, but because our rule books don't really work for what we want to build now, but it does add to the timeline and the risk of the project. And then not only that, the biggest barrier, which may sound crazy, is our infrastructure in Edmonton. And our infrastructure was built for a lot of single family homes and a downtown and a couple of commercial nodes, which worked for a long time, but we're growing and we're a great city to live in. And so people keep coming, which I really want more of them to come because I think we're awesome. But because of that, we need to make sure that we have pipes that work, we have sewage facilities that work, and we have hydrants that work. And so one of the big barriers that we're working with the city right now in EPCOR is the cost of hydrants. So it doesn't matter if you're building what's called a duplex, so 2 houses that are stuck together, or if you're building an apartment building or a tower, the cost of a hydrant varies drastically, and it's much more volatile than it is for a suburban style development out in Greenfield, because in Greenfield it's just you and some really great land that once was canola or corn or for cows. But with infill, there's already infrastructure there. So you need to rip up the sidewalks, close roads down, make sure that you're mindful of other pipes that are going, make sure that the water can actually get to the hydrant and come out at the right speed and rate. And the cost of a hydrant in Edmonton for an infill project ranges from $40,000 to $1.7 million. And the $1.7 million was for a 40-unit apartment building, and you can't finance apartment buildings at that cost. And I've heard of $400,000 for a sixplex, and you can't finance like a 6-row house at that cost. So there's not really a magic number for it. We're just efficient across all of Edmonton, whether it's commercial or residential. And so we're trying to find a new mechanism to raise funds to be able to grow sustainably and be safe. So yeah, that's some of the big barriers to infill development, and it's why things cost so much. And when we're working towards reducing these barriers, it also helps to bring some of those costs down. So now that you know a little bit about infill and what infill is and why it can be a little bit difficult, let's talk about who IDEA is and why it exists. So IDEA is a nonprofit organization. We have a board of 12. We have a membership of about 136 companies and people. We have about 46 active volunteers, 1 staff member, that's me. So if you ever communicate with IDEA, your first person you'll talk to is me. And we have a clear focus on infill development. So we don't talk about industrial development. We don't talk about suburban style development. They have different needs there. We really only focus on commercial and residential infill development. Because we have a strong focus on what we do, it helps to bring in people and helps to remove barriers because we know what we're focused on. Our mission statement is to promote and advocate for high quality infill development within Edmonton. Our vision is for our neighborhoods to flourish as complete communities with diverse housing and healthy lifestyle choices. And what we work towards is changing Edmonton towards people-centered communities. So for a long time, we have focused on car-oriented development, and it's not a war on cars and it's not a war on the suburbs. It is options. It's options within Edmonton. So if you're a senior and you live in one of those fantastic bungalows and you have a beautiful mature tree and it gives you apples every year and you make apple cider vinegar and jams and pies and it's all lovely, but you're getting to the age where you can no longer take care of the house or you don't have the means to anymore, we want to make sure that maybe there's some garden suites or some apartments in your area that you can move into so you don't lose your social connections to your community and you're not forced out of it. And if you're a young student and you want to walk or bike or scoot to your local school, whether it's a university or a college or a high school or junior high, we want to make sure that you have options to live in those areas no matter what your economic entry points are, and be able to access those neighborhoods because we have so many amazing neighborhoods in Edmonton that are mostly filled with single family homes, and not everyone needs a single family home and not everyone can afford a single family home. And especially right now in COVID, hats off to the people who are in a single family home and are cleaning it all the time, but I have a hard time managing 900 square feet. So
Same here. We won't show you what's behind the other side of this table.
Yeah, the wall looks good, but when you flip it around, there's a lot of laundry on my couch. So we're talking about options, whether it's living, whether it's working, or whether it's transportation or styles of parks. It's all about options. So now that you know a little bit about IDEA and who we are now, a little bit of our history is we were organized about 7 years ago by a group of developers, architects, and community members. They saw the need for a group of experts and people who are passionate about infill to work with the city around the rules and regulations changes. It's part of the reason we're changing all the rules and regulations now. And it's a real testament and hats off to them for what they started, because we Edmonton is actually looked at as one of the forefront of urban policy changes. We've done things that other cities just can't because there's not a consistent message from the pro-infill people in the city, because they're not organized, because it's hard to organize. It takes a lot of work and a lot of energy and resources and time. And we have had so many wonderful people in both community leagues and the industry that have put so much of their personal time into making this organization move forward. It is the reason that we've been successful. So now that I could gush about them forever, they are my favorite people in the world, but I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what we're doing, because that's kind of the juicy stuff. So some of the big things that we focus on is the technical aspects of infill, so the policies and procedures. So if you don't know about that, that's totally fine. It's kind of legally and nerdy, but we have worked on reducing parking requirements in Edmonton. Edmonton has a ton of parking. Whether you have noticed it or not, start looking for it. We, even in our most desirable areas, whether you're going to a restaurant or to an ice cream shop, you usually don't have to park more than 3 minutes of walk away. And for a major city of about 1 million people, that's a little bit crazy. That means we're using up a lot of space for cars. And that space for cars costs a lot of money to manage, to operate, and to build. And we're not really recuperating those costs. And they could be used for so much more fun things, like more parks, more street furniture, more ice cream shops, more coffee shops. I'm a huge shopper, so the more retail in Edmonton, the better for me. But there's a lot of other really interesting uses that we could have. So Edmonton is the first city in North America to remove parking requirements. And I can't tell you the amount of nerdy, amazing urban planning people in Edmonton that are so excited about it. One of our other members, Armando, him and I had like a whole hour-and-a-half conversation about the possibilities of Void Ave and where we'll be moving to next over the next 10 years. I do want to reiterate, though, that removing parking requirements doesn't mean no parking for developments going into the future. It just means the right amount. So the developer, the builder, the homeowner can choose how much parking they are actually going to need, because before we were requiring people to build like 2 per dwelling, and maybe you only had 1 car, or maybe the person who was living in the house couldn't even drive, yet they had 2 parking spots. That's a lot of space to shovel. It's not really fair to them. So that was the huge over this past year. We also did stuff like advocated for garden suites to be permitted, so allowed within the city of Edmonton, secondary suites to be allowed 3 units on 1 lot, which helps with affordability and diversity of housing choices. And then things for like the missing middle zones. As Edmonton grows, and now a lot of the industry has got really comfortable with small scale housing, they're testing the waters on mixed use buildings, smaller scale stuff, and small apartments and row housing. And it's really going to change Edmonton's landscape, which is really exciting. But our rules didn't allow for it. So we worked on making sure that they did. Sorry, you could tell I'm a little bit nerdy about my job.
That's good. It's always good to have passion, right?
I think so. I like passionate people. And then what other things are we doing? We know how important storytelling events and education are. So last year we held 9 different events from all different types of topics. We do an annual infill tour. This year we've had to postpone it, and we're looking at some virtual options. But usually we put on a tour where you can go into 6 to 7 different spaces, both commercial and residential, and look inside what people are doing and how they're living, and it's super fun. We also showed some mixed use projects off. We talked about parking. We celebrated some big wins. And then we usually do a few panels in the year to talk about different issues that are happening within Edmonton. We also focused on infrastructure. Infrastructure, as I talked about, is a huge problem. I went into hydrants probably a little bit more than you care to know, but it is interesting because who would look at a hydrant and think it costs that much money? You know, the average person, I don't think would. I didn't before. So now we have a cost share program with EPCOR, which has $2.4 million in it. It's a pilot program for 2 years where people can submit their projects and say, hey, you're asking for $750,000 for an 8-unit project that is next to an LRT station and has 3 bedrooms for great families and is just going to be super amazing, but your hydrant request is killing the project. Can I have some money for it? And if it checks off a whole bunch of boxes of what we're trying to build as a city, then they can qualify for that funding. We're also collecting all the data for all the projects that do and do not actually get money for this pilot program. And we're going to be asking the city to relook at how they finance infrastructure in October and say we need more money for this to help us grow as a city. We also work with the City of Edmonton on offsite levy conversations, emission neutral buildings, and we have a monthly meeting with them to talk all about infill and some of the barriers that we face. And my favorite thing, if you can believe it or not, for how much I've guessed about hydrants, is our infill certification program. Our infill certification program is designed to be built for builders, architects, planners, and developers to help expedite their permits, but also train them on everything infill. So it's it's 4 courses, sorry. It's Design 101, so it's taught by an architect and a planner and goes over design basics and elements that help you with some of your small scale projects, put some more thought and design in where you put your lines, your windows, your colors, and get to know all of that better. The second day is very technical. In the fall, we had it be a 2-day class. This year, we had it as a 1-day class. It was a very heavy class. We might go back to 2 because of how heavy it was. And it talks all about how to submit an application, how you calculate height, what's things around loft grading. It's all the nitty gritty stuff. Day 3 is construction practices, and day 4 is communications and community relations, because the community is so important to infill development and really helps us build a better Edmonton. So right now we've had 32 people go through the program. We have infraction system with them. So if they go into a neighborhood, build something amazing, but in the process think that they can put a toilet in front and garbage everywhere and no fencing, then they're not being a great builder. And so they don't get to participate and get expedited timelines. So none of them have gotten infractions, which has been super awesome. And then all of the permits have been processed under the committed timeline that the city committed to. So it's been a super successful program, and I am just so really proud of everyone who's been a part of it and all the teachers who made it happen. They really are the bread and butter of the course. So yeah, and then for the city for partnering with us on it, we have an amazing team at the city that we work with that is incredibly knowledgeable, super helpful, and they work really well with the applicants to make sure all their questions are answered. So the last thing about IDEA, we have 3 different committees. Last year we had 9. It was a lot for a small organization. What happened was we started with no committees, then we added 1, and then more issues and topics came up, and we kept adding and adding and adding to the point where we're like, okay, I think we're spreading our resources too thin, and we need to re-envision what we want to focus on. And so what our members really care about is influencing things, having correct and timely information, and interacting with each other. So for our influence, it's all the technical fun things that I've been talking to you about. For information, it's making sure that if you're not aware, you are aware, and you know what's happening. And we do that through our education program, through weekly newsletters, through social media, and through events. And then interaction is like getting together, having a drink, celebrating wins, learning from each other, and networking to grow businesses, because our community is amazing and I am so lucky to be a part of it, and it's fun to hang out with each other. and grow. So that's a little bit of an idea. And here's some fun pictures of some of the nerdy things that we do together. So you can,
Amazing.
yeah. I left my email up there if you ever want to get in contact with me. Shoot me off an email, or our Instagram and Facebook handle is Infill Edmonton. And you can find us there. Our Instagram has lots of fun pictures of projects, and you can message me on that. Sometimes I'm faster through Instagram than through email.
Sometimes it happens for sure. That's amazing. Yeah. There's so many things that I want to start asking you about because honestly, I did not know really what infill was beyond my parents were one of those people who were like, we don't want a triplex in our neighborhood back in the early 2000s. So I definitely, that's all I knew about it. But when I started looking up some things about IDEA, you were like, well, the library's infill. And I didn't even think that, Rogers Place, the library, these massive things are infill. So like the art gallery, when they redid that as well, right? As well as our new museum, like pretty much anything you're putting in an established place qualifies. And I didn't even really think about that before. So I think that's something really interesting that you guys have been doing and bringing awareness to.
Yeah, it's communities are not just built on lovely places to live, they're built on amazing attractions to go to, places to learn, places to spend your money, to eat amazing food. So yeah, it's all of that. It's work, play, recreation. We won't take we're not infill isn't parks, but we do love parks and we do love trees and we like to preserve them as much as we can. So yeah, it's infill is part of a community.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well. I know the whole fire hydrants thing kind of blew up a couple months ago. There was a very big article about how much they cost, and I was kind of taken aback. Like you're saying these numbers of up to like $1.7 million to put in a fire hydrant, and that's an insane amount of money for most people to even imagine. So you working with these smaller builders typically, I can't even imagine if they were trying to do something like that. How the one that blew up on social, they had to stop the project because there was no way.
Yeah, most developers and builders end up having to stop the project. Then they either build something at a smaller scale or they end up selling the lot the majority of the time, and say, well, we can't use the land for something new, innovative, interesting, that goes along with the market. I guess we'll just stick to the same old, and then we're just in this rut of building out and using amazing agricultural land and having to annex. And every new neighborhood that Edmonton builds, it takes more than 25 years through property taxes for the city to gain back the money that they had to put into it for building the lights, the roads, the libraries, the fire stations. And that's a lot of time for the city to be in debt. And it's the reasons why we're having such a hard time as a city, especially during this pandemic.
Yeah, that's super interesting just to get kind of like a peek behind the curtain, right? And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the question that I ask everybody. So I'm going to start there with that, which is with yours being a nonprofit, I phrased it a little bit like that, but normally we ask people what makes Edmonton an appealing place to start a business for you, or what makes it special?
Yeah, so the reason that it makes Edmonton as a special place to start a nonprofit is we are the city of champions. And I'm really, really bummed that our council of today wanted to move away from that mantra or catchphrase or slogan, whatever you want to call it. It started because after Edmonton had that big tornado in the 80s, around the time of the playoffs, that's why it's associated with hockey. So many people volunteered their time to help us recoup and get back to the version of normal that worked for Edmonton. And that spirit has never left, and I'm sure it was there before. But Edmonton has so many amazing nonprofits and people who understand the need to help and give time and expertise for us to grow. Um, our organization, especially when I joined, we had this amazing board of 12 small to medium sized like builders, developers, community members that knew that Edmonton was going to change rapidly over the next 15 to 20 years. And if they didn't organize, it wouldn't be done right. And there'd just be so many more stumbling blocks. And so they pooled their money together to hire someone. And they're like, please help us move this initiative forward because we need someone full time looking at it. And I'm so grateful that they took a chance on me. I love my job and love the team that I work for. And every year, our membership grows. We started with 33 members, and now being over 100, it just shows how much people know that this is coming and want to be a part of that change.
Definitely. I mean, even when you're mentioning it's been 20 years since looking at regulations, like that alone, you're like, okay, well, what else were we thinking about 20 years ago? We were thinking about Y2K. So things have changed quite a bit in every sense of the word. I mean, technology, the way that we develop infill as well, right? It's not just row housing as you've described. It's these really cool and very innovative infill houses that do include some of the cool skinny houses that we've seen, but also just using the space in such a different and unique way.
Yeah, for example, one of my developers last year built a totally wireless house where it reduced the amount of stress that things would go wrong, and it allows for less electricity use and more Bluetooth use within the house. And the people who bought it love it and just see amazing things out of it. And that innovation is coming out of Edmonton. And so it's only because we are willing to test new things and try new things and redevelop new things that
So,
kind of things happen.
yeah, so do you think that like Edmonton, that I know that giant mural exists, right, with the take a risk, it's the most Edmonton thing you can do. Do you think that kind of applies then to the infill community?
Yes, I get to brag all the time that we are a fail forward organization. we To have an organization grow the amount that we've been able to grow and pull off some of the big things that we've been able to pull off, it's because our board and our members are willing to try new things. And it's been brought up in a lot of our strategic planning sessions and our meetings where someone will throw out an idea and we say, okay, how can we make this happen? Does this align with what we're trying to get accomplished? And who can help? So it's never on one person, we're all doing it together. And I think that togetherness makes it a reality. So for a small organization to pull off the education program, it was a big feat for us, but we had 15 industry members, experts in their field, spend a ton of time over a month and a half putting together all the content for the people who go through the program and making sure that it was the highest quality that they could deliver. And it's that fail forward, take a risk that Edmonton is known for, and it is awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear as well because, you know, this is something that increases the profile of Edmonton, the innovation of Edmonton, the selling of Edmonton, pretty much every aspect of Edmonton. And I know we haven't seen major like marketing campaigns from the city perhaps, or necessarily them outwardly showing support for infill. Is that something that you've kind of run into with working with council?
Um, Actually, we have a ton of support within administration and council. So the city of Edmonton is on their second infill action roadmap. So what happens through 4 years ago, I think they had their first roadmap. It was built before I was a part of the organization and the community. And it talked about what are the top 20 things that we need to address to help move things forward. And they did that, and they did more than what they were expecting to achieve. And so they're like, okay, well, there's still lots of barriers. It's new. We still need to do more. and they went out to the community and said, how can we address this, and how can we move it forward? And so now we're on the second roadmap, and there's 24 items, and council has given each of those items a budget. Every time we raise concerns, they are willing to take a meeting and listen to it. So it's only because we have a council that's willing to look at new ways to develop Edmonton, new ways to finance Edmonton, new ways to bring in business and outside like immigration to Edmonton. Because we're taking new innovative actions, if we're always just throwing out and sprawling out, I don't think we would bring in the draw that we do. And I know that council understands that, and they know that they can't continue to finance our city the same way that we have. So it's kind of we don't have the money for it, and also we want to be a different city.
So yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the issue that we've seen with so many things right now is budget, but especially with the city. So knowing that they have committed to these things is probably a little weight off your chest, but as well, it's always something that you're constantly thinking about, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's definitely still a challenge to get things, get uptake on different projects, but 10 years ago, the city set a goal of 25% of development in Edmonton would be infill. We hit that target, and now in September, they're passing a new goal where it's 50% over the next million people will be infill development. So, wow. Yeah, some big changes are coming.
Yeah, I mean, that's exciting as well, because you talk about wanting to scoot to work or things like that. As downtown people with Homestead being right on Jasper Ave, I think a lot of what we have is that desire for walkability. And whether it's a grocery store or having ice cream stores downtown, it is something that I think we're seeing a positive change there, right? Like we have that whole new redevelopment of 109th that looks amazing. Obviously, even including our block, like it's the Alberta block, the Jasper block, and then everything around us is new. So we're technically one of the oldest buildings probably on Jasper, and then everything else is technically infill, right?
Yeah, well, and the great thing about spaces like Homestead or like DOSC around the corner, or Lockstock or Coffee Bureau, is that you need people to make those spaces successful. And the more you diversify your neighborhoods to allow for both residential and commercial office to live in the same space, it allows for more utilization of that space too, and more success of those businesses. Because if you increase foot traffic around a business, you significantly see an increase in revenue. Because yes, we are moving to an more online digital world, but a lot of businesses, if they hit 15% online sales, that's seen as successful, at least pre-pandemic. So still a lot of it is in-store traffic. And so if we have neighborhoods where you look at downtown, there's a lot of office and commercial only, so that our streets are a little quieter in the evening. And it's the same with Oliver. There's mostly residential, so in the day they're a lot quieter than they are at night. And once we start to integrate those communities, then it changes the vibrancy of it. You look at the university area where you have a lot of houses, and the university, there's a bit more activity. And as we see some of those houses that weren't kept up or just coming to the end of their life, changed into places that have secondary suites or smaller apartment buildings, more people get to go into those places, and more of those businesses will succeed, and more people will be able to lead more of a healthy lifestyle. I know myself, I used to live in the burbs, and now I live downtown, and it's a dramatic change in my waistline from when I lived in the burbs to when I live downtown, for how much from walking just on a daily basis.
Definitely. I mean, it just makes everything easier when you can walk to it, especially in the the climate that we have here. I'll wear my like double hoodie outfit and wrap the scarf around, which is actually going to come in more handy this year. But it's just so much easier than getting in a car or driving, 20 minutes away to something. You get to see people as well. It's a little bit more interactive for sure. So I'm definitely a fan of that. Um, so I'm going to ask you my slightly controversial question
Shoot.
because I'm sure you get quite a few of them. But I've noticed, like I mentioned earlier, the only experience I had with infill really at top of mind was my parents being NIMBYs, right? With NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard. And I've noticed there's a considerable amount of that in Edmonton. We see that with the LRT development as well. But how have you kind of developed talking points, and has that made you like adjust how you present information, like knowing who you're talking to? Like if you're going out into the community, you kind of understand their group a little bit more, or?
Yeah, well, I think depending who you're talking to and what their experiences are, you need to be respectful and mindful of what they're going through. So I talked a little bit about the fact that Edmonton kind of boomed after World War II and we had a lot of this tract housing. What happened was these families at that time started their families and their path and their journey, had kids, usually 3+ kids, saw them grow up, walked to school together. There was different amenities in their areas. They had little strip malls they could get Slurpees at. And their community really, really worked for them. And there was lots of really good things that were happening at that time. But as the neighborhood evolved and changed, the kids have grown up. They live in different neighborhoods now. And it's mom and dad at home, or mom at home, or dad at home. Or any other combination. And there's less people using the same amount of space, and they've seen their land significantly appreciate in value, which will help them retire and have a bit of financial stability in their life, which it works for them. But the people who they're in their kids' age or around those areas can't just afford to jump into that market right away. And unless they're both very successful things, so dual income, no kids, and it's still a challenge, it's still a reach for them. So you go into that neighborhood, they haven't had construction in a long time, so construction is noisy and a little bit messy. It doesn't always fit into everyone's lifestyle. I know my neighbors upstairs last week were putting in floors, and I went to my parents' house to work because it was very noisy. So you have that in your neighborhood for 6 to 8 months, and it's a little bit stressful. And the person who lived at that house before, maybe it was your best friend that you did Pilates together, or you went golfing together, or you like to have cocktails on every second Friday or vacation together. And it's hard to see that those memories being taken down. So it's memories, it's change, it's something that worked for one generation, but it doesn't mean that it didn't work for them. It just means that things have changed, and we want them to be a part of that change. We want to hear from them and grow with them, be respectful. Like maybe the apple tree in the backyard makes the best apples in the neighborhood. So we work to save that tree, and you be upfront with them about, hey, you know what? The likeliness that the fence that you shared it's going to fall down, but we have insurance for it, and we'll rebuild it, and we can pick the wood together and pick the color together, and it can be a better experience. And the people that are going to come in are going to love your neighborhood because they chose to live here because you guys made it a great neighborhood. The life that you lived and the work that you put into it, whether you're on the community league or you mow your lawn or your tulips in your front yard bring people joy, people want to buy into that. And so we're making space for those people to come experience the joy and the neighborhood that you've helped create.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think you kind of tap right into the nostalgia factor. I instantly, when you started talking about like this community, I was like, oh, that sounds exactly like where I grew up in the woods. And even then, you know, we planted these tiny little evergreens 30 years ago. They were when I was born, and they're like 30 feet tall now. So things do change. Like obviously they did look a little bit cuter back in the day, but the ones that you talk about with like apple trees especially, I know those are the pride and joy of many Edmontonians because it's one of the only things that we kind of can grow here. So there's definitely a love for our apple trees here, and it's nice to see like the respectful nature and working with those people and not necessarily saying, well, times are changing, you gotta ship up or shape out, right? Or shape up or ship out.
Yeah, no, that mentality I think was there a little bit at the beginning because everyone had high stress. And it is stressful. You're coming in and you're excited about a new opportunity to build something, and everyone's like, no, get out of here. So, but as Edmonton's infill community has grown, they've also developed techniques of how to talk to people and how to manage expectations, how to communicate timelines, when to provide the right information and how to provide it. And so it's about building the community together, and it's exciting to see us grow into that phase.
Yeah, I think that's a super sweet way to think about things, and the way that everybody should think about it. So I think that's something that we always want to carry forward, especially with a series like this, right? Is that community aspect, and we've built this together. It's not you, me, this or that, and I think we try to carry that pretty intently in Homestead as well. Is you, as somebody who's been a member for 3.5 years, you've built this place just as much as anybody else.
I love this place. It's, yeah, Homestead is part of my home.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I do want to thank you so much for sharing so much about kind of clearing up what infill is, as well as all of the really cool things that IDEA's working on, some major wins that you guys have had, which is so exciting to hear about. I am also very excited to see White Ave in the next 10 years. I just want to thank you again so much for joining us because I know it's been quite busy for you lately.
It has been a little crazy taking everything through a new COVID lens, but I thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited for what is happening now at Homestead and what's coming up.
Yeah, we're so excited. Obviously, even more Mariah is what we'll need to add in. So thank you so much for joining us, as well as for everybody else who joined us today, or whether you're listening or watching online. We definitely appreciate being able to show off such cool members that we have, as well as their impact on the entirety of the Edmonton community. So it's something very exciting. If you do want to get in contact with Mariah, always email Mariah at infilledmonton.com, or like she said, hit them up on Instagram at infilledmonton or Twitter. Obviously, everybody uses Instagram a little bit more, but feel free to reach out to them there. Next week on the show, we'll be having a corporate culture consultant come in from the city of Edmonton to speak to us. So we'll be having Derek Kwan talking on here, and he's going to be talking about the importance of building culture and diversity into your startup and how you can actually use games to bring that about. So we're in for some fun gamification talk as well as some exciting culture talk. So I'm very excited to have that next week. But thank you so much again, Mariah. And I can't wait until we can hang out more in person.
Me too.
All right. Thank you, everybody.